Yes, Virginia. There is still some hope out there. All right, keep hope alive. All right, there is still some hope out there. I want to run down what I think are some of the major bullet points to know about what transpired in Virginia, why, and what it means. Let's start by taking a look here at the big picture. Last night, this confluence of events is cosmic. The city of Atlanta wins the World Series, the all-time playoff chokers of this era. 14 years in a row, they made the playoffs. They only won one World Series, despite the fact like the entire pitching staff is in Cooperstown in the Hall of Fame. Atlanta, with all those injuries, goes on the road, wins the World Series, the city that was told it couldn't host the All-Star game because it's in a state that actually thinks you should show ID to vote. Atlanta wins the World Series the same night an immigrant black woman who loves Jesus, and ain't afraid to tell you about it, became the first of her kind statewide office winner in a former Confederate state known as Virginia. Now, folks, that is some cosmic, providential rebuking of the racist pagan wokeism. And that kind of stuff, we don't come up with stuff like that, folks. That stuff comes from on high, okay? So let those with ears to hear, let them hear. That is a resounding voice if you have ears to hear. So that's the big picture of what went on last night. Then there's the mood of the electorate heading into the event. I sent this out the other day. Only the American media would be shocked that an administration and political party that has made themselves an enemy of school parents, police, firefighters, soldiers, nurses, airline travelers and workers, and everybody who buys gas and food. Is that a lot of people?
It's a couple.
It's a few. Only the American media would be shocked to see such a group polling so poorly, because that's pretty much everybody who isn't a communist. However, we are still dealing here with the Republican Party, right? An outfit that knows how to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, right? We are still dealing with the Republican Party. Friend of the program, Daniel Horowitz, the weekly prophet of woe and lamentation, last night he went back and got a tweet I sent 4 years ago I had forgotten about, after Ed Gillespie lost the Virginia governor's race in 2017, when I had said, how many more times are Virginia Republicans going to run corporatist candidates like Ed Gillespie before finally admitting that is not what voters want? So thank you very much, Daniel Horowitz, for coming off the top rope with that. So now Glenn Youngkin had a choice to make. He could be that kind of milquetoasty candidate, or he could read the room. What do I mean by reading the room? Well, last night, folks, Mama Bear showed up, okay? Look at these stats. Look at what happened in Virginia from 2020 to 2024. I'm sorry, to 2021, just 1 year among women. Look at the difference between what Biden and Trump did with those numbers and Youngkin and McAuliffe. That is a 15-point swing in 1 year, folks. In 1 year, not even one cycle, in 1 year, which in my opinion means the biggest loser in Virginia is the Democrat, educrat, industrial complex. Because that state election basically became a platform for blowing up the vile, anti-American, racist, cultural Marxism that's basically been our curriculum in government schools for how many years now? That race blew that mushroom cloud, that issue. And what you saw is Mama Bear came out and said, oh, hell no. Oh, and you're going to rape our daughters too? No, not happening. And here's what I think it means moving forward. The GOP should feel confident to pursue an aggressive agenda of education reform, from funding to structure, everything. You should feel everything is on the table now. And to its credit, and I don't say that about the Republican Party a lot, this last legislative cycle, there were numerous states, including our own, putting such aggressive measures up for debate. The kinds of things people like me have tried to get them to do for years, but they thought were crazy and nuts. Those things ought to all be on the table in your red state right now. Because that's the number one driver of that massive swing of women voting in Virginia from one year to the next, is you threatened their kids. We should give a tip of the cap to our friends over at the Daily Wire. They played a role in this, right? If a tree falls in the forest and no one heard it, did it really fall, right? Well, it is the Daily Wire and Luke Rosiak who took a crowbar to the Overton window on what was going on in the schools with their reporting on what went on there in Loudoun and now in Fairfax County. They blew that story wide open. They forced that story into the media ecosystem, and they deserve to take a victory lap for that. If there was any justice in this world, Luke Rosiak would be winning himself a Pulitzer Prize next year. Because this is arguably the most impactful reporting that will be done in this country in all of the media this year, is what Luke Rosiak and the Daily Wire did, exposing what was going on in that school district. So yes, now I've noticed no one's ever accused Matt Walsh of being humble. They have taken approximately 39 victory laps. I've noticed the various folks over at the Daily Wire. But you know what? As the great man Babe Ruth himself once said, it ain't bragging if you can do it. They deserve every one of those helmet stickers, including the ones they're giving themselves, because they absolutely played a role in blowing this up. No question about it. Here's another big story from last night. We saw this with Trump, and now we're seeing it carry over. The GOP continues to make inroads with Latinos without caving on amnesty at all. If you look at the Fox News exit polling, Youngkin won Latinos by 11 points, 55 to 44. 11 points, 55 to 44. Let's go outside of Virginia for just a moment and look at what happened in this state house district in Texas. All right, this is a 75% Hispanic district. All right, and it flipped from Democrat to Republican last night in South Texas. And then there's the overall story if we go back to Virginia. Virginia has elected its first Hispanic attorney general and its first black lieutenant governor. We'll have more on her later in the show, okay? But it has also elected its first Hispanic attorney general. So you are continuing to see, again, so many shibboleths are being destroyed here. It wasn't too long ago on shows like this, we had to debunk GOP talking points about immigration. You remember doing some of those shows, right? How many of those columns and shows have I written and done? And our friend Daniel Horowitz has done all the more. That there was, I remember a phone call I received personally from Marco Rubio himself, telling me that unless we caved on amnesty, that we were going to lose the Hispanic vote forever, like we lost the black vote when JFK called Martin Luther King Jr. He told me this on the phone. One-on-one phone call I received from Marco Rubio himself, and he told me this. And now here we are, after courtesy of Trump, the most hardline immigration conversation we've ever had in the mainstream of American politics this century. And lo and behold, the GOP continues to make all kinds of inroads with Hispanics. Alexa, show me everything else that GOP consultants have been wrong about. Sorry, we don't have the time. That would be a long conversation, okay? Now, let's get to the Youngkin campaign. How did they do this? And I want you to keep in mind as we look at these numbers. This is a state Democrats had won by an average of 6+ points in the last 4 presidential elections, including plus 10 a year ago in the 2020 presidential election. So keep that in mind when you look at these numbers. So I went back and looked at the exit polling comparing Youngkin 2021 with Trump 2020. I already told you that Youngkin got plus 11 Hispanic votes. Not 11 points better than Trump. He won them by 11. Won them by 11. Look at this. Youngkin did 3 points better with black voters, 9 points better with all female voters, 8 points better among suburban voters. And this is the one In fact, before I tweeted this, man, I went and read this like 7 times to make sure my eyes were seeing, my 4 eyes, because I'm wearing my glasses. Make sure my 4 eyes were seeing what I thought I was seeing. But there it is. It is true. Youngkin actually outperformed Trump with rural voters in Virginia by 12 points. And rural voters were a higher percentage of the overall electorate in 2021 in Virginia than they were in 2020. Translation, Youngkin did better with Trump's base than Trump did. What the Youngkin campaign did here, and we've wondered on this show, could someone figure out how to do this? Because everybody's got their hot takes about Trump right now. He won it because of Trump. He won it because Trump didn't go. If you haven't learned anything from the Trump era, please, because I was making the same mistake. You need to learn this. You cannot make simplistic, two-dimensional binary analysis in the Trump era that just boils down to Cheeto Jesus saves or Orange Man bad. Because a lot of that is really, the reason why a lot of it's wrong is a lot of it is driven by you want either your Cheeto Jesus saves or your Orange Man bad narrative to be affirmed. So you look too simplistically at data and situations and not with enough nuance. What the Youngkin campaign managed to do here is what we have wondered on our show, could somebody pull it off? They did it in Virginia. They rebuilt the traditional GOP coalition with largely led by white suburban voters. They rebuilt that. But then they retained Trump's base, including his inroads with Hispanics. To me, this is the campaign to now emulate. Now, I didn't say Youngkin was the candidate to emulate. Everybody's their own person, right? But the way that what this campaign did is they managed to incorporate Trump's base of white rural voters who either voted Democrat or were soft GOP and are now hardcore Trump, and the inroads that Trump had made with Hispanics. They managed to incorporate that while rebuilding the traditional GOP coalition. And how did they do it? By glomming on to the very culture war issues that prior to Trump, Republicans always said you couldn't run a national election on and win. Let's continue. Here's how else they did it now, okay? They provided a proof of concept that you can marry Trump's base and issues to the softer side of Sears, that you don't have to necessarily be unnecessarily confrontational and offensive while going there. Because we've wondered, is it just a package deal? Did you have to put up with some of Trump's turnoffs to get the issues that he talked about? Or could you have the best of both worlds? The Youngkin campaign proved last night that, yes, you can. Because here, GOP voters are never going back to the Romney, Ryan, McCain era. That's never happening. So you have to recognize the reality. Trump has moved the GOP base. Or the GOP base, Trump took advantage of the movement the GOP base already made when no one else wanted to go there, whichever you prefer. That's the GOP base is not moving. It's not going back. So then can you grow beyond that? Can you fashion a message that rebuilds the traditional coalition on top of Trump's base? The Youngkin campaign did that. Furthermore, when you look also at what they did last night, they put it, the whole GOP has a choice now. You can follow the Youngkin playbook of representing Trump's base and issues with a more unifying personality. Or if you don't, remember, we always used to say the GOP created Donald Trump. By refusing to speak to the issues he spoke to, that's why they got Trump, right? We used to have those conversations in 2016, 2017. Well, the Youngkin campaign has shown you have a choice, GOP. You don't have to do that. You know, if you want to adopt his issues and run on them aggressively and let your campaigns be a platform to these issues, you'll get rewarded by voters. If you don't, though, you're going to get rewarded with more Trump because people would rather have their issues addressed than worry about mean tweets, okay? At least a good group of people would anyway. So what does this all mean for the future? All right, there's 4 things I think we should point out about what it means for the future. Let's start with this from our colleague, Dave Rubin, last night. That the real signal after Virginia is to stop fearing these hysterical, power-hungry progressive lunatics. Take off your masks. Don't let them inject your children and go about your life. And, oh, by the way, let's go Brandon. Yes. No fear. No fear. Stop fearing these elements. Fear is their currency. They love it. It's what they live on. You know what they don't do well? Fight. Don't fear them. Second, from our friend Julie Kelly over at American Greatness, don't underestimate the remorse vote of upscale suburban Biden voters. They traded mean tweets for a country unrecognizable from a year ago. Too late now, but these votes are quasi mea culpas. She's dead nuts right about that. And that plays into what I mentioned earlier. Youngkin had enough of a unifying personality that he didn't make these people feel dirty for voting on the things they're actually offended by, that they agree with Trump with, or they agree with Trump on. Third, Clay Travis tweeted out last night, noticing what went on in Virginia and then Minneapolis, soundly rejecting the referendum to defund the police and saying, hey, sanity is being restored. Kinda. But we must understand, and in next segment, we're going to play for you a reminder of what we're really up against and the stakes we're playing for here. We must understand the zealotry driving this will not be deterred by election losses. Any conservative pundit on Twitter or Facebook right now telling you that Democrats are reassessing, no, they're not. No, they're not. They're not reassessing anything. You don't think they don't read polls? They could have moderated a little bit this entire time. They chose not to. So you have to understand that this is a will to power.
They're calling everybody racist in Virginia as we speak. Yes. They just got a black lieutenant governor.
Yes.
The White House this morning said this is just a sign voters are fed up with how long it's taking for us to pass the infrastructure bill.
Yes, this is a will to power. There will be no self-awareness. All right, this is a will to power. So you have to understand that the vote is the first step of vigilance, not the final one. You cannot go back home after doing this now and get complacent. In the overtime today, we're going to talk about what it looks like when we get complacent. And you know what it looks like? What happened actually in our own community last night. That's what it looks like. We'll talk about that in the overtime today at blazetv.com/days. You're going to have to soundly defeat this. The way that people used to run for office on platforms of slavery or segregation. And then it was so soundly defeated in the culture that no one nowadays would dare run on a platform like that, even if they thought it. That's what you're going to have to do to this pagan wokeism, this cultural Marxism. It will not be deterred by election losses. It will quadruple down. It must be soundly defeated, definitively defeated. Understand this zealotry as I make my final point here. That what you're up against is not whether Glenn Youngkin is an opportunist or true believer. Originally, he was running a very milquetoast campaign. And then when Loudoun County erupted, he jumped on that train. Who knows? Maybe he is an opportunist. It doesn't matter if he is. Here's why. Because the issues propelled Glenn Youngkin to victory last night. Glenn Youngkin did not propel the issues. The issues propelled Youngkin. So see, folks, it doesn't come down to whether he's a coward, an opportunist, or a true believer. It comes down to us. How serious were we, the voters? How serious were we about these cultural issues? Because if voters are serious, they're going to compel Youngkin and Republicans, who have now total control in Virginia, compel them to act accordingly. But if this was, I threw a tantrum, I got mad, and I voted once, and now I'm going to go back home, listen to my favorite conservative show, and no longer make this a participatory sport, but a passive-aggressive one, then it does rise and fall on the character of Glenn Youngkin. Is that how a constitutional republic is supposed to behave? The first words of the Constitution, of course, are, we, the character of the founding fathers and George Washington and John, is that how it starts?
No.
What's it start with? We, the people. It doesn't matter who Glenn Youngkin is. It matters who we are. I've gotten several texts from friends around the country. I just know this guy's going to sell us out. That won't happen unless we are sellouts. Youngkin didn't buy this. Youngkin wasn't a celebrity. Youngkin wasn't even a known political commodity. Youngkin grabbed a surfboard in his campaign and wisely saw a wave forming and said, hells yeah, let's ride that puppy. Who formed that wave? We the people did. The people did. So this does not rise and fall on the integrity and character of those that represent us. It rises and falls on the character and integrity and courage of the represented.